I am not personally aware, but I understand it's been very well received. And, you know, I bet Brad probably. We're about to start.
Good morning, everyone. Is this on? Good morning. Welcome to Westside Unitarian Universalist. If you haven't been here before, my name is Morgan Ringelspaugh. I use they, them pronouns. We do have a couple of announcements to go through real quick, so bear with me. These will be in our newsletter as well as your order of service. For those of us joining us on YouTube through the live stream, those should be displaying on the screen as we kind of hit the highlights. Like I said, newsletter and website have more information. Our adult religious exploration continues as we think about theology. The Zoom link will be available. That's Wednesdays at 6. You can find that Zoom link in the newsletter. We also have our Thursday evening conversations ongoing at 6:30 to 8 o'clock or so. Again, Zoom link is in the newsletter. We also have an upcoming Wednesday, second Monday lunch. Everyone is welcome. That will be at Parkside Grill on March 14th. Please contact either Diane Gray or Judy Bridget for more information. We're also going to go ahead and invite Bridget Ross up as she tells us a little bit about her yoga class.
Hello, everybody. I'm Bridget Ross. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I'm going to be doing a yoga class starting next month in March. It'll be, brought this up to make sure I don't say the wrong dates. It's March 13th and 20th is the beginning, and it'll be like at 1 o'clock right after service. And I'm going to do chair yoga so that everyone will feel welcome and comfortable and not be like, oh, I don't know if I can do it, but everybody can come, and it'll be great. And it's for my final once you get finished with the yoga training, you have to do an outreach project, and I wanted to do it for the church because to me this church was like yoga. It loves you, it accepts you as you are, and you're great just for showing up. So I always love that, and I just wanted to share that with everyone and share how yoga has helped me be a calmer person and a better person. So, and it's also in April too. So it's March 13th and 20th and April 3rd and 10th. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget. A couple of important announcements as well. Family Promised Host Week is this week. We do still need volunteers for that. Check out more information in the weekly newsletter, as well as our website. We also have the Endowment Committee Party starting March 19th at 4 p.m. There is more information there, basically a big get-together as we kind of go through the endowment committee process. More announcements can be found in your order of service as well as in our newsletter today. Today we are privileged to have a guest speaker. Recently ordained by the Oak Ridge Unitarian Universalist Church, Reverend Juniper Meadows has been a leader in the East Tennessee trans community since 2012. Her ministry is rooted in storytelling, exploring the sacred depth of the natural world, and nurturing cultures of compassion and listening. From 2018 to 2021, Reverend Meadows served on the Trust Steering Committee while completing her seminary training and helping teach congregations to navigate the complexities of the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm very glad that we've got Juniper here with us today to tell us a little bit more about the 8th principle. So everyone settle into your seat, and I'm going to go ahead and sound our Tibetan bowl. Thank you, Sandra. We also have our chalice lighting today, found through the worship web through UUA's website. This is For Each and For All by Eric Walker Wickstrom. A flame rises from the flaming chalice, a symbol of Unitarian Universalist faith. We light this chalice for all who are here and who are not, for all who have ever walked through our doors, and for those who may yet find the spiritual home, for those we can't even yet imagine. For each of us and for all of us, may this flame burn warm and big. In just a moment, Sandra's going to come up and tell us a little bit about the music that she played for the prelude and what she'll be playing for the offering. During that time, we do take up an offering to support our mission here at Westside and to keep our community going. So, Sandra?
I wanted to tell you a little bit about what I'm playing in honor of Black History Month, because I think the story behind the music is always interesting. Both of the songs that I'm doing today are actually in the hymn book, and I wish we could be singing them, and perhaps you might even want to look at the words of them later. But the first one that I've already played is Sometimes I Feel Like a Motherless Child, and of course this is classified as a sorrow song in the African American spiritual tradition for obvious reasons, but the words of it are very powerful when you think truly what it's like for so many people to feel like a motherless child as the families were separated during the horrible and brutal time of slavery in our country. The second one that I'm going to do is Wade in the Water, and I didn't know all the history of Wade in the Water till I did some reading about it. But this song was sung among slaves when they were in the process of trying to escape from their captors through the Underground Railroad. And they were following, of course, the secret routes of the Underground Railroad. But this song was sung when they needed to get in the water, to get in the river, because the bloodhounds that were chasing them could not track them once they actually went into the water. So they were warned to get off the trail, get into the water, so their owners could not recapture them. And then serendipitously, in this morning's newspaper, there's an entire section on Black History Month. If you don't subscribe to the paper, you might want to buy the paper today just to have this wonderful whole section on Black History Month. But serendipitously, I learned this song, Wade in the Water, was used again during wade-ins in the 50s and 60s in Sarasota, Florida, where blacks were not allowed to use the pristine beaches used by whites. So they were doing wade-ins, like the sit-ins that were happening, at lunch counters. And caravans of African American people would leave their churches on Sunday, go out to the beaches, and wade into the water. And again, singing this song. And eventually, the beaches were desegregated, and they could use them freely. So that was just very meaningful to me that I found out that this morning. So now I'll do Wade in the Water.
a poem titled Wild Geese. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clear blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. These words by Mary Oliver. So, small clarification, I am speaking on the eighth principle somewhat, but I'm mostly speaking on the widening the circle initiative and all of its components, because it's not just the eighth principle. We're also talking about other principles or sources. It's a comprehensive examination of who we are as Unitarian Universalists. And so, about a month ago, I had the special honor and surprise honor, I might add, because this is so often the case, I had forgotten to put it on my calendar, of sitting on a panel for the Article 2 Commission, the party of good folks that are currently studying our Unitarian Universalist principles and sources to see how we might better articulate the spirit of who we aspire to be as a people of faith. I think I'm going to take this off because that seems to be okay here. Thank you, vaccinations. I was there as a member of the UU Professionals Organization for Trans People, it's TRUST, alongside colleagues from Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism, Equal Access, which is our UU Disability Advocates, and DRUM, D-R-U-U-M-M, Diverse and Revolutionary UU Multicultural Ministries. Gotta love these acronyms. Together, we offered reflection on a series of questions, primarily centered around proposed changes to our principles. The addition of the eighth principle, that would call us to journey towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions and accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions within ourselves and our institutions. And also, a proposed expansion of the first principle, which calls us presently to affirm the inherent worth and dignity of all people, but with this possible expansion, which has been, I think people have been considering since as early as 2010, to consider the inherent worth and dignity of all beings in this faith without dogmatic tests. I think it can be a compelling idea. So I had been aware, as many people have been, of the eighth principle and am and was fairly familiar with it, but I was ignorant of this possible expansion of the first principle. I believe these two principles inform and empower one another and would do the same with our standing principles harmoniously. And moreover, I believe they offer a fresh perspective on what it might mean to be a Unitarian Universalist in the 21st century. Not a transformation, but a direction. Not even a direction, not a straight line, but in all directions. Letting our congregations, these circles of relation and compassion and community, widen themselves from the inside out, like a star pressing against its own gravity to shine its light on the dark, fueled by its own fusion, the power of its own coming together. The poet in me wants to say love is something like that. A power born out of intense comings together, the power of relationships, of change. And when we come together across our differences, like atoms fusing, we, the collective we, become something new, more than the sum of our parts. I prefer these poetic materialist metaphors born to ones that appeal to scripture or dogma. And as I've been hunting for a word to put a name on the implications of this widening, or this possible way that we might declare who we are, I find myself drawn to a word over and over and over again: animism. It's a fun word. In one form or another, it's common throughout many religions, though it has, for the better part of its history, actually been used in an almost pejorative way to describe the religions of native and uncolonized people. Popularized by the English anthropologist Sir Edward Tyler in his 1871 book, Primitive Culture, where he employed the term to describe a belief in more than human souls imbued within objects, animals, and all things. This framed an infantilizing and demeaning hierarchy of religious evolution, from this definition of animism to polytheism and monotheism, and finally towards rational empiricism, this crown on the apex. Another invented reason to subjugate native peoples, occupy their land, and erase their culture. Those acting under such reason were likely ignorant of its own construction, subtly affected perhaps, but certainly affected. Our own faith played its hand in the erasure of native culture in the late 19th century, when the American Unitarian Association established a boarding school on the Crow Reservation in Montana called the Montana Industrial School for Indians, as though native people who had been here for centuries upon centuries prior to the arrival of Unitarians had not been industrious. So perhaps our forebears were as well caught up in the wrong-headed thinking that this assumed animism of native people were some kind of mistake to be corrected. All in the name of progress, right? How often do we do great damage in the name of steamrolling progress? And what a terrible shame. And yet one that we as a denomination have taken and are taking steps to address, and to deepen our solidarity with and listen to and learn from native people, that we might honor their inherent worth and dignity and draw this circle wider. The boarding schools are a part of our history. We are not pure or unstained, and yet we remain here. And as long as we remain and remain alive, we might yet change, becoming more real, more alive, more transformed by the love, the safety, the joy and depth we find in relationship to other people. We're getting there. Our tradition is alive. We don't call ourselves the living tradition for nothing. Now, when I think of animism, I don't think of it as existing on some hierarchy stacking towards the white heaven of Western Enlightenment. I see it as a perspective of relationality with the world. I like the word eco-sociality. Eco-sociality, first coined, word y'all, by American epidemiologist Nancy Krieger, to explain the relationship between the spread of disease and social conditions. But here, I'm trying to use it in a similar, though less specific way, as a combination of ecology and social, that relationships are less born out of fundamental things and are fundamental in and of themselves. The things we think of as fundamental, our bodies, our stuff, our lives, rocks, sticks, feathers, oceans, gravel, stars. None of these things exists on its own or out of relationship with other things. They just don't. They just don't. Barring getting lost in the solipsism of first causes, everything that exists right now comes from a host of interactions, of interminglings, of transformations and becomings between different things across the eons. Our relationships, and not just the ones we have with other people, are the sources of our being, and our being informs the quality and what kind of relationships we will have, the interrelatedness of all relationality. Now, animism understood this way is simply the emotional and perhaps the spiritual recognition of the relationships we have with the many beings, entities, and aspects of the more than human world. In a certain kind of sweet irony, I can imagine a redrawing of Tyler's evolutionary tiering of religion twisting itself like a snake biting its own tail to arrive back at animism as a formal recognition of interdependence, born out of and in the superior position down the line from rational empiricism. This is why some ecologists meet philosophers like David Abrams would coin the term the more than human world. Not that nature and culture are in opposition to one another or are competing equals, but culture is always sustained by and held by this more than human world. As far as religion goes, this construction of animism feels less like something that you just believe in or buy into, and more like a remembering, waking up as the gloomy sleep of alienation falls from our eyes. Alienation is like the opposite of animism here. This idea that we are fundamentally separate, distinct, individual, ultimately isolated. And this affects how we view relationships between people too. We have our own privileged ethnic group or group of people set aside. We may fail to witness to the worth and dignity of difference. And we humans are certainly individuals. Unitarian Universalists are especially individuals. But our individualism exists because of our interrelatedness, not in spite of it. As members of pre-agrarian hunter-gatherer nomads, we needed to be able to think for ourselves as individuals, to make our own decisions and relate to the world on our own terms. We also needed the survival advantage of community and companionship, and we had to get along. This balancing act, it's gone on for a long time, I reckon. This kind of spirit, at once liberated and rooted, is our birthright as humans, and it's not ours alone. Tyler's mistake was that he assumed that seeing the agency of a more than human world, more than human beings, was necessarily a mistake in and of itself. I certainly experience animals that aren't humans as beings with agency. Even animals that I know are effectively eusocial, like bees and termites, I tend to see as individuals. Most people don't struggle to see animals as individuals, but we so often see them as individual objects for consumption rather than agents of their own fate. I'll never forget the sink in my stomach when I saw the woods behind my grandma's house here in Rockwood, just reduced to a barren hill, stripped for timber. The social system that had been built up over there for years, that had already once recovered from being stripped bare decades upon decades before, reduced again. And yet, if you were to visit that little corner today, you would once again find that the woods are reclaiming themselves. They are remembering who they are. As I witness their remembering, I remember who I am. I am the woods. I am this earth experiencing itself. My feet on this ground of being, my hands reached out to the obvious untouchable, just beyond words. I can't say if the first principle being changed to include all beings, or the eighth principle being included, will mean animisms to some, or will necessarily make us better. To some, it might feel like a mandate for veganism or something, or some kind of mission. But I believe the journey towards spiritual wholeness is a principle, and that we can expand our compassion to name the worth and dignity of more than human beings. Because dogmatic tests are not who we are, antithetical to Unitarian Universalism. Our individualism remains a precious gift born out of our relationships, not in spite of them. Here in this world that can be so hard, may we take solace and journey toward that spiritual wholeness, to witness with a grateful heart to all the loves that have brought us into the world today, that sustain us. And may such a recognition give us the will and the courage to draw the circle wider and wider and wider still. Our principles, they aren't rules, they aren't laws or edicts from the mountaintop. There's nothing sacred or particularly special about how many we have, but it does matter what they say. These are guideposts, reminders, stars that we get to set in the sky to call us through uncertainty. We are a living tradition, an eco-social sacred system, and we are supposed to change over time. We are supposed to evaluate who we are and how we choose to be. Lots of religions do this. The Catholic Church all but dropped the idea of limbo. Can't remember when that is. I think it was like the 20th century. Limbo just... It's okay for us to change, y'all. It's okay for us to pick up new ideas, and we will likely change again in the future. Certainly. Because this is how we grow, from the inside out. An expansion fueled by the love that we share today, and in the days and years and decades to come, as we grow and continue to change, perhaps we adopt this first principle in the eighth, or one or the other, or neither. Regardless, it's my heart's hope that we consider with open minds and willing hearts, caring hands, the dynamic aliveness of our faith, and come to see our capacity to call ourselves into new directions as the times call us, as one of the fundamental features of what it means to be a Unitarian Universalist, that we are not a stone monolith, but we are a jungle, that we are a dynamic system of people with diverse ideas and diverse hearts and diverse callings coming together to build something, y'all. Call that beloved community. Call that journeying towards spiritual wholeness. Our faith itself, born out of dynamic and prophetic people who likely had doubts, who were afraid and concerned and not sure if this thing is going to work. Lots of people pushing each other around and fighting at general assemblies. Ooh, the 60s were a wild time. But here we are. And think whatever gods of our understanding that we have, that we are here. Because it's been a hard journey. But our ancestors changed. They found the courage, the will. And I believe we can too. We're not even a century old together, but we have a legacy behind us and a bright future of new beginnings ahead of us as we journey together towards wholeness, heartfulness, and all new kinds of holiness. So may it be. As we leave this space, may we be fools for love, pilgrims for justice, and until we meet again, may we rock, roll, and move in that spirit of beloved community, journeying together towards one another. Amen. And go in peace.